Hi everyone, this is Selvi. Today's interview question is when the initial version and final version of definition of ready and definition of done gets created. Okay, so first let's try to understand what is initial version and final version. As the name suggests, initial means the very first version. What we will be creating is called the initial version. Final version means what is the last version that we will be creating, that is called as the final version. Now let's get into the topic of initial version. Initial version means it generally happens for new projects, because in new projects only there will be the first version or initial version gets into picture. For new projects, we all are aware of something called as planning sprint or preparation sprint or sprint zero. What we will be doing there, we will be preparing for the actual sprint execution in terms of infrastructure, agile ways of working. We will be defining the process, review process, coding guidelines, build pipeline, everything related to what is necessary for us to actually start the sprint execution. We will be preparing in this particular period. So this period also includes what is the actual way of working we are going to define and what are the process that we are going to follow. Those things also getting discussed here, and we will also be defining those things in this period. Definition of ready and definition of done checklist are also getting prepared at this particular period. Team, when they are discussing about the agile ways of working, the process, how we are going to follow, the communication plan, the time we are going to conduct our events, when the reporting style, all the things get discussed. As part of the discussion, we will also be definitely discussing about what we are expecting in definition of ready checklist and what we are expecting in definition of done checklist. So during this phase of planning or preparation or sprint zero, we will be preparing our first version or initial version of definition of ready and definition of done checklist. So this is very much clear. First thing is initial and first version is only applicable for new projects. So when we will be doing that, we will be doing that when we are defining the ways of working, defining the process. When we will be doing those things as part of our preparation or planning or sprint zero. Basically the period before the actual sprint execution, we will be doing all this work. So framing our definition of ready and definition of done also takes place at this period. So now now the initial or the first version is ready. Now let's come to the second part of the question. What is the second part? When the final version of the definition of ready and definition of done gets created. First of all, we need to understand, before getting into the question of when it gets created, whether final version is applicable for these two documents or checklist. No, there is no final version for definition of ready and definition of done checklist. Why? These two checklists are dynamic in nature. What is dynamic? Dynamic means keep changing. Why keep changing? Adapt to the learnings from the previous sprint. That is part of the continuous improvement. So when we know that it is going to be dynamic and not static, we don't have anything called as final version. So when there is no final version, there is no question of when we will be creating the final version. So we all are aware of the definition of these two artifacts. What is definition of ready? It is a dynamic checklist. What is definition of done? It is a dynamic checklist. Why we always use the word dynamic there? Because these two checklists are, it undergoes changes. When it undergoes changes as part of the retrospective event, always Scrum Master initiates a topic, any kind of changes required in definition of ready and definition of done to the team. Now team will be suggesting based on their learning, yes, we want to add something in definition of ready, we want to add something in definition of done. So there is nowhere possible that we can say that, okay, this is the final version. After this, there will not be any change. Final version means that is the version which is something like a version. After that, you will not have any more further versions. But for definition of ready and definition of done, that state won't come at all. Because even after sprint 10 also you can expect changes. Even after sprint 20 also you can expect changes. So because these two checklists are dynamic in nature, so there is no final version for definition of ready and definition of done. Hence the second question answer is, as there is no final version for definition of ready and definition of done, because these two checklists are dynamic in nature, we always expect changes coming into these two checklists as part of the retrospective event, as part of our learning from the previous sprints. As they are dynamic in nature, we don't have any final version or static version for these two checklists. I hope this would have answered the interview question. Thanks everyone for listening. Happy learning and stay tuned.